You just made this hotel look poor.
But I made it.
I made it look
Human.
You're fired.
Richard Coleman ripped the badge from Victoria's blazer in front of the stunned guests. You just made this hotel look poor, he hissed. Victoria looked at the badge in his hand, then at the hungry stranger standing near the entrance. No, she said quietly. I made it look human. Richard smiled coldly. Then you're fired. Victoria didn't beg. She turned, walked past the guests who had watched her humiliation, and disappeared through the staff exit. What she didn't know was that the man she had risked her job to feed had been watching everything. And by the next morning, everyone in that hotel would be answering to him. Let's dive into it. Victoria Williams had spent the last 6 years learning how to become invisible. Not literally. People saw her every day. They saw her at the front desk of the Kensington Grand, greeting guests with a smile, answering phones, arranging room changes, solving problems, and apologizing for mistakes she hadn't made. But being seen and being valued were two different things. Victoria knew the difference very well. At 29, she had become one of the most dependable employees in the hotel. She arrived early, stayed late when necessary, and rarely called in sick. If another employee failed to show up, Victoria was usually the person management called. If a guest complained, Victoria was expected to calm them down. If a room wasn't ready, Victoria was expected to find a solution. But when someone asked who deserved credit for keeping the hotel running smoothly, her name rarely came up. That belonged to people like Nicole Lane. Nicole was the hotel's operations director. She wore designer clothes, arrived in a different luxury car almost every week, and had a talent for making every accomplishment sound as though it had been her idea. Victoria had learned not to complain about it. Complaining only made things worse. She needed the job. She had a modest apartment, bills that never seemed to stop arriving, and a younger brother whose school expenses she occasionally helped cover. More importantly, Victoria had a dream she hadn't told many people about. One day, she wanted to open a small catering company. Nothing extravagant. She imagined a warm little kitchen where people could order homemade meals for birthdays, weddings, office lunches, and family gatherings. She had been saving toward it slowly. $20 here, $50 there. Whenever she received overtime pay, she tried to put some of it aside. She kept the money in a separate savings account and refused to touch it unless she absolutely had to. It wasn't much yet, but it was hers. And every time she looked at the growing balance, she felt like she was building a door toward another life. The Kensington Grand was supposed to help her get there. Instead, it was becoming the place that constantly reminded her how far she still had to go. Victoria had learned that the hotel had two sets of rules. One for guests with money, and another for everyone else. A wealthy guest could shout at an employee and receive an apology. An employee could politely defend herself and receive a written warning. A VIP could arrive 20 minutes late for a reservation and still be seated immediately. A staff member could arrive 2 minutes late and be questioned about her commitment to the company. Victoria had watched it happen so many times that she had stopped being surprised. Still, there were moments when the unfairness got under her skin. Like the morning Nicole presented a report to senior management using numbers Victoria had spent 3 weeks compiling. Victoria stood at the back of the meeting room while Nicole accepted compliments for the work. Nobody mentioned Victoria. Afterward, Nicole passed her in the hallway. Good job on those figures, she said casually. Victoria looked at her. You mean the report? Nicole smiled. Exactly. Then she walked away. Victoria swallowed her irritation and returned to work. There were other battles she had learned not to fight. Richard Coleman, the general manager, was worse. He had worked at the Kensington Grand for more than 15 years and behaved as though the building belonged to him. He cared obsessively about the hotel's reputation. Every employee had to smile. Every wealthy guest had to feel important. But he had very little concern for the people working behind the scenes to maintain that image. Victoria had once watched Richard reprimand a young waiter for taking 5 minutes to sit down after working 7 hours without a break. Victoria had slowly discovered that surviving at the Kensington Grand required a certain kind of silence. And she had become very good at being quiet. But she had never been good at watching someone suffer. That was the one part of herself she had never managed to silence. She had been raised to believe that a person's circumstances didn't determine their value. If someone was struggling, you helped if you could. If someone was hungry, you didn't make them feel ashamed for needing food. If someone was embarrassed, you didn't make their humiliation worse. Victoria didn't consider those beliefs remarkable. They were simply how she saw the world. And on the evening that would change her life, she was about to discover exactly how expensive those beliefs could become. It was a Thursday night, and the Kensington Grand was busier than usual. A private dinner was being held for several of the hotel's biggest investors. The restaurant had been transformed for the occasion. Crystal glasses covered the tables. White linen stretched perfectly across every surface. Fresh flowers stood in tall arrangements beneath the chandeliers. A string quartet played softly near the far wall. Every detail had been designed to communicate one message. Money belongs here. Victoria had been moving between the host stand and the front desk for most of the evening. At around 8:30, she noticed that one of the private tables had canceled unexpectedly. The kitchen had already prepared the food. Dozens of plates were now sitting untouched. Victoria hated waste, but she knew what would happen. Most of it would end up in the trash. She picked up a tray containing several untouched meals and began carrying it toward the kitchen. She was halfway there when she noticed the restaurant entrance becoming unusually quiet. A man was standing just inside the doorway. Victoria slowed. He was Korean, tall, broad-shouldered. His black hair was messy and damp, as though he had been outside in the rain. He wore an old dark jacket that had clearly seen better days. His jeans were faded. His boots were scuffed. There was several days' worth of stubble along his jaw. He looked exhausted. Not drunk. Not dangerous. Just tired. And hungry. People were already staring. A woman at one of the nearest tables whispered something to her husband. A waiter glanced toward security. The hostess looked uncomfortable. The man took a few hesitant steps toward the restaurant. "Excuse me," he said. The hostess looked up. "Yes?" He swallowed. "Could I get something to eat?" The hostess's expression changed immediately. "I'm sorry? I haven't eaten today," he said. "If there's anything you can spare, I'll take it." The hostess glanced toward the dining room, then back at him. "Sir, this is a private restaurant. I understand. You need to leave." The man looked down at his clothes. "I'm not trying to cause trouble." "Then you should go." He hesitated. "I can pay for something small." The hostess looked almost offended. "With what?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills. "It's not much," he admitted. A man sitting nearby laughed. Victoria's grip tightened around the tray in her hands. The stranger looked embarrassed. He quietly put the money away. "I'm sorry," he said. Then he turned toward the door. But before he could leave, Richard Coleman appeared. And Victoria knew immediately that whatever small dignity the man had left was about to disappear. Richard Coleman looked at the stranger for less than 3 seconds. That was all it took. He didn't ask his name. He didn't ask why he was there. He simply looked at the man's worn jacket, dirty boots, and unshaven face and made his decision. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked. The hostess straightened immediately. "He's asking for food." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Sir, this is a private event." The man nodded. "I understand. I'm leaving." "Good." Richard stepped closer. "You can't come into a hotel like this and approach our guests." "I wasn't trying to bother anyone. You're already bothering people." The stranger looked around. Several guests were still watching. "I'm sorry." Richard pointed toward the entrance. "Security will escort you out." 2 security guards began walking toward them. The man didn't resist. He simply stood there with his head lowered. Then a woman at one of the tables spoke loudly. Someone should have stopped him at the door. Her husband chuckled. "Maybe they need better security." A few people laughed. Victoria felt something twist inside her. The man looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him. Richard turned toward the security guards. "Take him outside." The man raised his hands slightly. "Please, I don't want any trouble." "Then don't cause any." Richard turned away as if the matter were already settled. The man started walking. Victoria watched him pass. She saw his shoulders. She saw the way he kept his eyes down. She saw the embarrassment on his face. And then she looked at the tray in her hands. Untouched food. Enough for several people. Food that would be thrown away in less than an hour. She stopped. She could already hear Richard's voice in her head. Don't interfere. Stay out of it. It's not your problem. Victoria looked at the man again. Wait. He stopped. Richard turned around. Victoria walked toward them. Sir? The stranger looked at her. Victoria looked at the tray. She pulled one of the untouched plates free. Here. The man's eyes moved from the plate to her face. For me? Yes. Richard's expression hardened. Victoria. She ignored him. She handed the plate to the man. Sit somewhere outside and eat. He didn't immediately take it. You'll get in trouble for this. Victoria gave him a small smile. Then I'll get in trouble. He finally accepted the food. Thank you. You're welcome. Richard stepped between them. Put that food back. Victoria looked at him. It hasn't been served to anyone. That isn't the point. Richard's voice became colder. The point is that this man isn't a guest. Victoria glanced at the untouched plate. Then at the stranger. He isn't asking for a room. He's asking for food. Richard stared at her. Are you questioning me? No. Then follow instructions. Victoria said nothing. The stranger lowered his eyes. I should go. Victoria looked at him. Take the food. He nodded. Then he turned toward the entrance. Richard watched him leave. Then he looked back at Victoria. What exactly do you think you're doing? Helping someone. This is a luxury hotel, Victoria. I know where I work. Apparently you don't. Victoria felt heat rising in her face. Richard stepped closer. You have been here long enough to know the standards. Yes. Then you should know better. Victoria looked around the restaurant. The guests had returned to their conversations, but several were still watching. She lowered her voice. It was food that was going to be thrown away. That's not your decision to make. She nodded. Okay. She picked up the empty tray and walked away. She thought it was over. It wasn't. 10 minutes later, she was behind the host stand when the stranger appeared again. He had finished the food. He stood several feet from the entrance. He wasn't trying to come back inside. He was simply standing there. Victoria noticed him through the glass doors. She walked outside. Why did you come back? He looked at her. I wanted to thank you. You don't have to. I do. Victoria smiled. You're welcome. He looked toward the hotel. They were going to throw me out. I know. You didn't have to help me. Victoria shrugged. Couldn't just watch. He studied her face. Why? She didn't understand the question. Because you were hungry. He was quiet. Something changed in his expression. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked, What's your name? Victoria. Victoria? Victoria Williams. He nodded. I'm Minjun. Nice to meet you, Minjun. Nice to meet you too. Victoria looked at the time. She had only 20 minutes left in her shift. She reached into her purse. There was one $20 bill inside. It was supposed to buy groceries tomorrow. She looked at it. Then at Minjun. She held it out. Take this. His eyes widened. No, please. I can't. It's okay. He pushed her hand back. You need it. Victoria gave a small laugh. I'll figure it out. He looked at her carefully. Why would you give me your money? Because I don't know when you'll eat again. He stared at the $20 bill. Then slowly took it. His fingers closed around it. Thank you. This time his voice was different. Victoria didn't know why. She simply smiled. Get something warm. She walked back through the hotel doors, leaving Minjun standing outside. She had no idea who he really was, and he intended to keep it that way until morning. Victoria arrived at the Kensington Grand at 7:30 the next morning. She had barely slept. Not because of Minjun. Because of Richard. She knew she had crossed a line the night before. She had seen the way he looked at her. She knew something was coming. Still, she never imagined how quickly it would happen. She stepped through the employee entrance and immediately noticed the strange silence. Normally, The morning staff were talking, laughing, and rushing toward their stations. That morning, people looked at her and then looked away. Victoria stopped at the locker area. Pearl, one of the senior housekeepers, approached her quietly. "Victoria, what's wrong?" Pearl hesitated. "You haven't heard?" "Heard what?" Pearl looked toward the hallway. "Richard has been asking for you." Victoria's stomach tightened. "Why?" "I don't know." Before Pearl could say anything else, Richard appeared. "Victoria." She turned. "Come to my office." She looked at Pearl, then back at him. "Now." Victoria followed him. Richard closed the office door behind them. On his desk was a folder. Beside it was Victoria's employee badge. Her stomach dropped. "Sit down." She remained standing. "What's this about?" Richard opened the folder. "Last night's incident. I already explained." "You don't need to explain anything." He pushed a document toward her. "This is a formal termination notice." Victoria stared at it. "You're firing me?" Richard leaned back. "You violated hotel policy. I gave food to someone. You gave hotel property to an unauthorized individual after being explicitly instructed not to." He pushed the badge toward her. 6 years, Victoria. And this is how you choose to behave." She looked at him. "I thought 6 years of good work would mean something." Richard's expression didn't change. "It doesn't excuse insubordination." Victoria looked down at the badge, then picked it up. She thought about her rent, her savings, her catering dream. Then she thought about Minjun standing outside the hotel with a plate of food in his hands. She set the badge on Richard's desk. "If helping someone who was hungry makes me a bad employee, then maybe this isn't where I belong." Richard smiled coldly. "Now you're beginning to understand." Victoria turned toward the door. Then Richard added, "And for your own sake, don't expect a reference from this hotel." She stopped, but she didn't turn around. "Okay." She walked out. The moment she stepped into the hallway, she saw Nicole standing there. Nicole smiled. "I heard." Victoria looked at her. "Congratulations." Nicole's smile widened. "You finally learned that being nice doesn't make you valuable." Victoria stared at her for a moment, then walked away. She didn't cry until she reached the parking lot. And even then, she wiped her face quickly, because 6 years of her life had just been reduced to one sheet of paper. She sat inside her car. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. That afternoon, she opened her banking app and looked at her savings. The number made her chest tighten. 6 years of saving had never felt like enough. Now, without a paycheck coming in, it looked even smaller. She calculated her rent, utilities, food, transportation, her brother's school expenses. Then she opened the separate account where she had been saving for her catering business. She stared at it for several seconds. She had worked so hard to build that little dream. Now she might have to spend it just to survive. Victoria closed the app. She wasn't ready to give up yet. Not yet. That night, she barely slept, turning the day over and over, replaying Richard's voice. At 7:15 the next morning, her phone rang. An unfamiliar hotel extension. She almost let it go to voicemail. "Ms. Williams," the voice said, careful and formal. "You've been asked to attend an emergency staff meeting this morning." Victoria sat up. "I don't work there anymore." "I was told to ask you to come anyway," the woman said. 9 o'clock. The grand ballroom. Victoria frowned. "Why?" "I wasn't told why. Only that your name was on the list." The line went dead before Victoria could ask anything else. She sat there a long moment, staring at the phone. A list. Her name on a list, the morning after she'd been fired for feeding a stranger. None of it made sense. Just come back, Victoria. She thought about ignoring it. She had every reason to, but some small, stubborn part of her needed to know what this was. She got up and got dressed. In the end, she chose a simple navy dress, low heels, and a black blazer. Nothing flashy. Nothing that made her look as though she was trying too hard. At exactly 8:45, Victoria walked through the hotel entrance. The same entrance she had used hundreds of times. But this time, she wasn't wearing an employee badge. The security guard looked at her. "Ms. Williams?" Victoria nodded. You're expected in the grand ballroom. Victoria frowned. The grand ballroom? Yes. She walked toward the elevators. Something felt wrong. The ballroom was never used for staff meetings. It was reserved for weddings, corporate events, and private functions. When Victoria reached the doors, she stopped. Voices were coming from inside. She opened the door and froze. Almost every employee in the hotel was there. Housekeeping, front desk, kitchen staff, valets, concierge, managers, everyone. Victoria stepped inside slowly. Pearl spotted her immediately. Victoria, what's happening? I don't know. Pearl looked around. Neither does anyone else. At the front of the ballroom stood Richard. But something was different. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't barking instructions. He wasn't smiling. He looked nervous. Very nervous. Nicole stood beside him, repeatedly checking her phone. Victoria noticed something else. Neither of them was wearing their usual confident expression. Richard looked toward the ballroom doors every few seconds. Then the doors opened. Conversation stopped. A man entered. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His black hair was neatly combed back. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a simple watch that probably cost more than Victoria's car. Two men in dark suits followed him. Victoria stared. Something about him felt familiar. Then he looked directly at her. And she knew. Her breath caught. The worn jacket was gone. The scuffed boots were gone. The unshaven face was gone. But those eyes. She knew those eyes. Minjun. The room went completely silent. Richard hurried forward. Mr. Seo. Minjun didn't acknowledge him. His eyes remained on Victoria. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Minjun smiled faintly. Good morning, Victoria. Her heart began pounding. She looked around the room, then back at him. What are you doing here? Minjun turned toward the assembled employees. I believe some of you already know me. Most don't. So I'll introduce myself properly. He paused. My name is Seo Minjun, the chairman of Seo Hospitality Group. A murmur swept through the room. Victoria's face went blank. She knew that name. Everyone in the hotel did. Seo Hospitality Group owned luxury hotels across the United States and Asia, and the Kensington Grand had been rumored for months to be in negotiations with the company. Victoria slowly turned toward Richard. His face had gone completely pale. Minjun continued. As of 6 this morning, Seo Hospitality Group has completed the acquisition of the Kensington Grand. Someone gasped. Another employee whispered. Oh my God. Victoria couldn't move. She looked back at Minjun. The man she had given her last $20 to was standing in front of her as the new owner of the hotel. But Minjun wasn't finished. He turned toward Richard. Mr. Coleman. Richard swallowed. Yes, sir. Where is Victoria Williams' termination notice? Richard's lips parted. Minjun's expression hardened. I asked you a question. Richard looked toward Victoria. She was fired yesterday. I know. That's why I'm asking where it is. Richard's face tightened. There was an incident. I don't care about the incident. I want to know why the woman who treated a hungry person with dignity was considered a liability by this hotel. Nobody spoke. Minjun looked around the room. Last night, I entered this hotel wearing old clothes. He paused. I wasn't treated like a guest. I was treated like garbage. A few employees lowered their eyes. I asked for food. I offered to pay. And I was told to leave because I didn't look like someone who belonged here. Richard tried to speak. Mr. Seo, if I had known. Minjun turned toward him. That's exactly the problem. Richard stopped. Minjun's voice became colder. You would have treated me differently if you knew who I was. But Victoria didn't. She didn't know my name. She didn't know my company. She didn't know I owned anything. She only knew I was hungry. He looked at Victoria. And she gave me food. Then she gave me her last $20. The room erupted in whispers. Victoria looked down. She hadn't expected him to mention that. Minjun continued. I asked myself one question all night. What kind of hotel fires the only employee who remembers that a hungry person is still a human being? Richard's face had lost all color. Minjun turned to him. I believe I have my answer. Richard swallowed. Sir, please let me explain. You had your opportunity to explain when you thought I was nobody. He looked toward the security officers standing near the ballroom entrance. Effective immediately, Richard Coleman is relieved of his position as general manager. Richard stared at him. You can't. I can. And I have. The security officers stepped forward. Richard looked around the room. For the first time, there was no one he could order around. No one he could threaten. No one he could blame. He turned toward Victoria. His face was filled with anger. But she didn't look away. She simply watched him leave. The doors closed behind him. Silence returned. Then Minjun turned toward Nicole. Ms. Lane. Nicole's shoulders stiffened. Yes? Your employment status is under review. Her mouth opened. But you will remain in the building until the review is complete. Nicole nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Minjun looked at the employees. There will be changes at this hotel. But before I make them, I want to hear from the people who have worked here. He paused. And I want to start with the woman who started all of this. His eyes returned to Victoria. She stepped forward uncertainly. Minjun studied her. Then he asked the question that would change her life. If you could change one thing about this hotel, Victoria, what would it be? She looked around the ballroom. She could have asked for her job back. She could have asked for a promotion. She could have asked for more money. Instead, she thought about the man standing outside the restaurant the night before. She thought about the way everyone had looked at him. Then she answered, I'd make sure nobody who works here ever has to choose between keeping their job and doing the right thing. Minjun stared at her. A slow smile appeared on his face. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for. Victoria wasn't sure what Minjun meant. The room remained silent after her answer. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. But for once, she wasn't embarrassed by them. Minjun walked toward her. You don't want your old job back? Victoria hesitated. I didn't say that. A few employees smiled. Minjun did too. Fair enough. He turned toward the room. For the past several months, my company has received complaints about this hotel. He paused. Employees being mistreated. Tips disappearing. Complaints being ignored. People being punished for speaking up. Richard's face flashed through Victoria's mind. Minjun continued. Every complaint was dismissed by management as exaggeration. So I decided to see the truth for myself. He looked down at his suit. I came here as someone nobody important would recognize. And what I saw confirmed every complaint we received. A few employees exchanged glances. Minjun's expression hardened. This hotel has spent too much time protecting its image and not enough time protecting its people. He turned toward Victoria. And that's going to change. Victoria didn't know what to say. Minjun looked at her. I want you to help me change it. She blinked. Me? Yes. Why me? Because you already understand what this hotel forgot. He paused. People matter. Victoria felt something shift inside her. But she was still cautious. What exactly are you asking me to do? Minjun glanced around the ballroom. Starting today, you will oversee employee welfare and guest experience. Victoria stared at him. I don't have management experience. You have 6 years of experience solving problems that management created. That isn't the same thing. Maybe not. But it tells me more about you than a title does. He handed her a folder. Your new position gives you direct access to me. If an employee has a problem, they come to you. If a guest is mistreated, you investigate it. If management makes a decision that harms the staff, I want to know. Victoria looked at the folder. And what about my salary? A few people laughed softly. Minjun smiled. 3 times what you were earning. Victoria's eyes widened. 3 times? You heard me. She looked down at the folder again. She could already hear Richard's voice. You're not valuable. You're replaceable. But now the owner of the hotel was standing in front of everyone telling her the opposite. She looked at Minjun. Why? His expression softened. Because you were willing to give away your last $20 to someone you thought had nothing. Victoria looked away. It was just $20. No. Minjun shook his head. It was your last $20. She looked back at him. You remembered that? I remember everything about that night. There was something in his voice that made her uncomfortable. Not because it was threatening, because it sounded personal. Victoria lowered her eyes. I don't want this position because you feel sorry for me. Minjun's face became serious. I don't feel sorry for you. Good. I want it because you earned it. The ballroom remained quiet. Then Minjun turned to everyone else. And for those of you who have been afraid to speak up, you don't have to be anymore. He pointed toward the door. My office will be open this afternoon. No retaliation. No secret write-ups. No punishment for telling the truth. If someone violates that rule, they answer directly to me. The employees looked at one another. Then Pearl slowly raised her hand. Minjun nodded. Yes. Pearl stood. I've worked here for 17 years. She looked nervous. I've complained about missing tips 3 times. Nobody ever investigated. Minjun's expression changed. How much? Pearl hesitated. I don't know exactly. Victoria looked at her. We'll find out. Pearl nodded. Then another employee stood. Then another. Within minutes, the ballroom had become something entirely different. People who had been silent for years were finally speaking. Victoria took notes. Minjun listened. And for the first time since she started working at the Kensington Grand, Victoria felt like someone was actually hearing them. The following week was exhausting. Victoria's new office was small, but it had a window overlooking the lobby. She also had something else she had never had. Authority. The first case she investigated involved missing employee tips. Small amounts, $20 here, $30 there, but added together, enormous. She traced the payments to a discretionary fund controlled by Nicole and took the evidence to Minjun. How long? He asked. At least 2 years. His jaw tightened. Bring Nicole in. Nicole sat across from Victoria's desk, her usual confidence gone. Victoria laid out the records without raising her voice. At first, Nicole insisted the missing money was the result of accounting errors. Then she claimed the transfers had been approved by management. But Victoria kept finding documents, emails, payment records, internal messages. Each one connected Nicole directly to the missing tips. You took employee tips. I didn't steal anything. I transferred them. Not to the people who earned them, Victoria said. You have no idea what it takes to run a hotel like this, Nicole snapped. Maybe not, Victoria said. But I know what it takes to earn $20. Nicole had nothing left to say. She stood and walked out. Nicole did not walk away because she was defeated. She walked away because, for the first time, she was afraid. 3 weeks later, the hotel felt different. Not the marble or the chandeliers, the people. Employees took breaks without fear. Junior staff got considered for promotions. The restaurant started feeding anyone who came in hungry, an idea Victoria proposed and Minjun approved without hesitation. He began showing up more. Not as the owner, just as Minjun, drinking coffee alone in the lobby some evenings. One night, Victoria found him there. Do you regret helping me? He asked. No, she said, without hesitating. Even after discovering who I am? That's the part one don't understand. Why did you never tell me? Because I wanted to know what someone would do when they thought I had nothing, he said. I found the answer. He reached into his wallet and set a folded $20 bill on the table. You kept it? Every day. It reminded me that the first person to make me feel human here didn't know I was a billionaire. Victoria picked up the bill, smiling despite herself. Good night, Minjun. Walking away, she realized something. She wasn't falling for the billionaire. She was falling for the man who'd once stood at the restaurant door with a few crumpled bills in his pocket. Their conversations grew more frequent, more comfortable, until Victoria finally asked the question she'd been avoiding. Would you still be interested in me if I hadn't helped you that night? I didn't fall for you because you fed me, he said. I noticed you because you treated me like a human being. Those aren't the same thing. I don't want to be someone who wants you for what you have, she said. Then don't want what I have, he said. Get to know me instead. And that was exactly what she did. The investigation into Richard and Nicole widened. Employees who'd been quietly fired came forward. The evidence became impossible to ignore, and the board dismissed both of them. Richard left with a security escort and a small box of his belongings. Nicole was standing several feet behind him. For once, she wasn't dressed like the woman who had controlled the entire hotel. Her expensive handbag was gone. Her hotel badge had already been collected. She stood quietly beside the security officer waiting to escort her out. She looked at Victoria. There was anger in her eyes, but underneath it was something else. Regret. Not regret for hurting people. Regret that she had been caught. Victoria noticed the difference. Nicole lowered her eyes. Victoria said nothing. She didn't need to. The hotel had already spoken for her. Richard looked at Victoria standing beside Min Jun at the lobby, wearing a badge with a title he never imagined she'd hold. You planned this, he said. No, she said. You did. Everything that happened started with the choices you made when you thought nobody could stop you. He had nothing left to say. He walked out. How does it feel? Min Jun asked. Honestly, I expected to feel happier, she said. But watching him leave does feel good. 6 months later, the Kensington Grand won an award for outstanding workplace culture. Victoria almost skipped the ceremony. Min Jun insisted she go. Accepting the award, she stepped to the microphone. 6 months ago, I lost my job because I helped someone who was hungry, she said. I thought that was the worst thing that could happen to me. It turned out to be the beginning of the best thing. Later, on the hotel rooftop, Min Jun pulled the same folded $20 bill from his jacket and held it out to her. I don't want the money anymore, he said. Then what do you want? You, he said. Not because you helped me. Not because you work for me. Just you. She kissed him. It wasn't rushed. When they pulled apart, she looked out over the city. The same hotel that had once thrown her out now carried her name among its leaders. And every evening at the restaurant entrance, no one asking for food was turned away. She'd made sure of that. 1 year later, Victoria stood in her own commercial kitchen. A sign on the door read Williams Catering and Events. You didn't have to do this, she told Min Jun. I gave you the opportunity to start it, he said. The rest is yours. She'd insisted the business stay separate from the hotel. No special treatment, no free contracts. She wanted to know she could succeed on her own name. Min Jun handed her an envelope. Inside was a photograph from the night they met, and behind it the original $20 bill now framed. You're ridiculous, she said. Maybe, but you still love me. Unfortunately, she said, smiling. On the wall by the kitchen entrance hung the framed bill, with a small plaque beneath it, words she'd chosen herself. Never measure a person's worth by what they have. The woman once fired for feeding a hungry stranger had built the life she wanted. And the people who once treated her as invisible could do nothing but watch her rise. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe and share to others. Also leave a comment to share your thought about the story.